Your Majesty, you must
Sir
consider the
William
gravity of the
Kingston
situation.
arrives at
The
Anne's
King's
apartments
patience
to
wears
escort her
thin.
to the
I
scaffold.
understand the risks, Thomas.
The walk from the
but my
Queen's
conscience
apartments
is
to the
clear before
execution
God.
site is
I
roughly
am
200
innocent of
yards,
these charges,
taking perhaps
Thomas.
5 minutes at a
Before
slow,
God, I
ceremonial
swear it.
pace.
You
But
must
these
tell
are the
king.
longest 5 minutes of Anne's life, because
It was
they
not
trace a route
dream,
she
my
walked
lord.
3 years ago
The fires
in
of
triumph during her
Smithfield were but a
coronation
shadow
celebrations.
of what I witnessed.
The Tower of London
A darkness
was where
is
Anne had
coming.
stayed before her coronation, preparing for her moment of glory. She had walked through Cold Harbor Gate, then as queen in waiting, crowds cheering, her future limitless. Now she walks the same path as a condemned traitor, crowds silent in shock. Anne is accompanied by 200 yeomen of the King's Guard, a massive military presence for one unarmed woman. This isn't about security, this is about spectacle. The guards transform Anne's execution into a state ceremony, giving it the weight of official justice rather than murder. Behind the guards come tower officers, then Anne's 4 ladies in waiting, all weeping, then her chaplain. Anne herself walks with her head high, observers noting that she's never looked more beautiful. As Anne passes through Cold Harbor Gate and the scaffold comes into view, eyewitnesses report that she looks around desperately, scanning the crowds and the tower battlements as if expecting to see a messenger from the king bearing a last-minute pardon. There is no messenger. There never was going to be a messenger. By 9 a.m., Henry VIII is already dressed and listening
The
for
Lord
cannon
bless you
fire
and keep
signaling
you, Anne.
Anne's death. The
Have no
scaffold was
fear.
built hastily in the last 2
I
days.
shall see you safely.
Constructed
through
on
this.
Tower Green specifically for Anne because her execution warrant specified a private beheading inside the tower walls, rather than the public execution site at Tower Hill, where the 5 men accused with her
Christian
had been
people,
executed
I
days
am
prior.
come hither to die.
Why the difference?
For according
Officially,
to the law,
to preserve the
and by
dignity
the
of a
law
queen.
I am judged
Actually,
to die.
to prevent potential riots or rescue attempts by Anne's supporters. The scaffold stands approximately 4 feet high, requiring Anne to climb wooden steps to reach the platform. Waiting on that platform are several witnesses required by law, members of the King's Council, including Anne's own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, the King's illegitimate son, the Duke of Richmond, and, most significantly, Thomas Cromwell, architect of Anne's destruction, here to ensure his plan reaches completion. Also on the scaffold, the French
Let it be known
executioner.
that those
He
who
wears no
oppose this
mask,
marriage
which is unusual.
oppose the
English
will of
executioners
heaven.
typically wore hoods
Your
to protect their
silence
identity
now
from
is your
revenge.
oath.
But this French swordsman is anonymous by nationality and distance. He'll return to France after this single job. He's visibly nervous, which is understandable. He's about to become the first person in English history to execute a queen. The sword is hidden beneath straw on the scaffold platform so Anne won't see it and panic.
I am so
It's a specialized execution sword, shorter
I am
than a
come hither
combat
to
sword,
die.
designed specifically for
And I commit
beheading.
my soul
The blade
unto
weighs
Jesus.
approximately 4 pounds with a razor-sharp edge. Anne mounts the scaffold with assistance from Kingston. She turns to her ladies, who are sobbing, and comforts them, showing more concern for their emotional state than her own imminent death. Then she addresses the crowd. What she says next has been analyzed by historians for 5 centuries, and for good reason. Her speech is a masterpiece of coded communication under duress. Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, for according to the law and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that whereof I am accused and condemned to
It's
die.
all right.
But
You're
I pray
safe
God
now.
save the king, and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there
testament to
never,
your
and
grace,
to me
your
he was ever
majesty.
a good, a gentle,
Truly,
and sovereign
a
lord.
most merciful
And thus
king.
I take my leave of the world and of you
By the
all,
crown's
and I heartily
grace, your
desire you all
debts
to
are
pray for me.
cleared.
O Lord, have mercy on me. To God I commend my soul. Read that carefully.
I trust
Anne
our
explicitly
friend
refuses to
appreciates this
confess
display
guilt.
of royal
I will
mercy.
speak nothing against
be a
it,
shame
and
to
I am
repeat it.
come hither
He
to accuse
understands
no man
completely.
are not admissions of guilt.
May his soul
Their
find
refusals
peace
to
in the
participate in the
afterlife.
false narrative. She praises Henry because doing otherwise would doom
A
her
swift
daughter
cut,
Elizabeth.
Bessie.
If Anne dies
It will
denouncing
be
Henry,
cleaner.
Elizabeth becomes the daughter of a traitor who remained defiant to the end. But if Anne dies praising Henry, Elizabeth
Hush now,
becomes
my
the innocent
lady.
daughter of a
It was
woman who
only a
acknowledged the
dream.
king's mercy.
You are safe
Anne
here
is
in your
sacrificing
bed.
her own vindication to protect her daughter's future. After her speech, an executioner tradition follows. The swordsman approaches Anne and kneels before her, asking forgiveness for what he's about to do. This might seem like compassionate ritual, but it serves a practical purpose. It establishes that the executioner is merely an instrument of lawful authority, not a murderer acting on personal will. Anne grants forgiveness, as expected. She removes her headdress, and one of her ladies helps her tuck all her hair into a linen cap so nothing interferes with the blade. Anne kneels on the scaffold. She's positioned upright rather than laying her head on a block, because sword executions require the victim to be upright with the neck extended. A lady ties a blindfold over Anne's eyes. This is mercy, genuine mercy, because Anne won't see the blade coming. She begins praying aloud. Jesus, have pity on my soul. To Jesus Christ I commend my soul. Lord Jesus, receive my soul. The crowd, which has been murmuring, falls completely silent. The executioner picks up his sword. His hands are visibly shaking. This is the moment of maximum tension. In a few seconds, Anne Boleyn will either die cleanly in one stroke, or she'll experience the nightmare of a botched execution. The swordsman signals to an assistant, who suddenly shouts, "Bring me the sword!" This is a deliberate distraction. Anne instinctively turns her head toward the sound. In that instant of distraction, the executioner swings. The sword makes two complete revolutions over the executioner's head to build momentum. Then it descends in a single swift arc. The blade strikes Anne's neck at precisely the correct angle, between the fourth and fifth cervical vertebrae. The execution is perfect. Anne's head separates from her body in one clean stroke. She likely felt nothing beyond a moment of pressure. Unconsciousness would have been instantaneous, as the brain, suddenly deprived of blood and oxygen, ceased function within 2 seconds. But here's the detail that haunted eyewitnesses. Anne's lips continued moving for several seconds after decapitation. This isn't supernatural. It's neurological. The brain contains enough residual oxygen for approximately 10 to 15 seconds of basic activity after blood flow stops. Muscle memory continues. Anne's lips were forming words of prayer when the blade struck, and those neural patterns continued briefly afterward. Observers interpreted this as Anne's soul departing, still praying. Science explains it differently, but the horror remains the same. Anne's head falls to the straw-covered platform, blood pouring from severed arteries. Her body, still kneeling, remains upright for a moment before collapsing. One of her ladies, braver than the others, immediately picks up Anne's head and wraps it in a white linen cloth, blood soaking through instantly. The other three ladies, refusing to let any man touch their mistress, lift Anne's body. They carry her away from the scaffold, struggling with the dead weight while weeping. Within minutes, cannon fire erupts from the tower, the prearranged signal that Anne Boleyn is dead. The sound reverberates across London, announcing to the entire city that England's queen has been executed. At Whitehall Palace, King Henry VIII hears the cannons. He immediately boards his royal barge and travels upriver to Chelsea, where Jane Seymour is waiting. He wastes no time in mourning or even acknowledging Anne's death. His focus is already on the next marriage, the next chance for a male heir. At the Tower, Anne's body is carried to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. But there's a problem. Nobody prepared a coffin.
Safe with me.
Anne was Queen of England, but she's being buried like a criminal. Her ladies find an old arrow chest in the tower's weapon storage and use that instead. Arrow chests are long and narrow, designed to store arrows laid end to end. Anne's body fits because she was notably slender, but it's a grotesquely undignified receptacle for a queen. Was this incompetence or deliberate insult? Some historians argue there simply wasn't time to prepare a proper coffin given the rushed execution schedule. But Sir William Kingston was a competent administrator who'd overseen countless tower operations. Is it possible he genuinely didn't believe Henry would execute Anne until it actually happened?
Cast your
That he
burden
assumed,
upon him,
right up
for he
until the
cares for
scaffold
you.
was built, that the king would relent? If so, Kingston's failure to prepare a coffin becomes evidence that even those closest to the situation found Anne's execution unthinkable. Anne is stripped of her jewelry and blood-soaked clothing before burial. Her possessions, including expensive garments and jewels, are confiscated by the crown. Incredibly, Henry VIII will pass Anne's jewelry to Jane Seymour, his next wife. Imagine wearing a dead woman's jewelry stripped from her corpse after her husband had her executed. That's the level of callousness we're discussing. Anne is buried in the chancel of the Chapel of St. Peter ad vincula next to her brother George, who was executed 3 days earlier on trumped-up charges of incest with Anne. After Anne's execution, Henry and Thomas Cromwell systematically attempt to erase her from history. Her portraits are destroyed. Her letters are burned. Her initials and emblems that once decorated Hampton Court and other royal palaces are removed and replaced with Jane Seymour's. It's a deliberate program of damnatio memoriae, the Roman practice of condemning someone's memory by destroying all records of their existence. But they can't erase everything. Most importantly, they can't erase Anne's daughter. Elizabeth survives her mother's execution, technically a bastard with no claim to the throne, raised away from court by various guardians. Nobody expects her to ever become queen. Henry will have a son with Jane Seymour, Edward VI, who will inherit the throne. Elizabeth is forgotten, dismissed, irrelevant, except history had other plans. 22 years after Anne Boleyn's execution, against every odd, against every expectation, Elizabeth ascends to the throne as Elizabeth I. She rules for 44 years, becoming arguably England's greatest monarch. The daughter they tried to erase became the queen who defined an era. Anne Boleyn's greatest legacy wasn't her brief time as queen. It was Elizabeth, the daughter whose existence Henry tried to delegitimize, who vindicated everything Anne fought for. At Chequers, the Prime Minister's country home, there's a ring that once belonged to Elizabeth. Open the locket and you see two portraits, Anne and Elizabeth facing each other. Elizabeth kept her mother's memory alive when everyone else tried to bury it. That's the real ending of Anne Boleyn's story. Not the scaffold, not the arrow chest, but a daughter who became a legend. This is Flow of History, where we dig into the moments that shaped everything. If this story of power, betrayal, and ultimate vindication shocked you, we've got hundreds more episodes revealing the brutal truths behind history's biggest names. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell, because the next story we're uncovering will blow your mind even more than this one. The past isn't what they taught you in school. Let's find out what really happened.
Mother.